Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling this thing called the planning fallacy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so basically we all kind of know this, like, deep down, but we're going to go into the research of, like, why it happens and all that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so, like, the planning fallacy is that thing where you think you can get something done way faster than you actually can.
Yeah, like thinking you can clean your whole apartment in like an hour.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it always takes way longer.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a universal experience, I think.
So, like, is there actual research on this? Like, is this a real thing, or are we just making this up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a ton of research on this.
Okay, so, like, what kind of research are we talking about?
Well, one of the earliest studies was back in 1979
Okay.
by these two psychologists named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
Oh, yeah. Those guys are famous, right?
Yeah, they're pretty much like the rock stars of behavioral economics.
Cool.
And they were actually studying a bunch of different cognitive biases.
Okay.
And the planning fallacy is just one of them.
So, like, how did they even figure this out? Like, what kind of experiment did they do?
So one of their most famous examples involved a curriculum development team.
Oh.
They asked each team member to estimate how long it would take to develop a new curriculum.
Okay, makes sense.
And they got a range of answers.
So, like, different people had different ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Some people thought it would take 18 months. Some said 30 months.
Okay, so pretty big spread already.
Yeah. And then they asked the team member with the most experience on similar projects for his estimate.
Okay, so this guy's, like, the veteran.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
He'd been there, done that. And you know what he predicted?
Like 2 years.
7. At least 7.
Oh, wow.
And he said that 2 years was like the absolute best case scenario.
Oh, no.
Like if everything went perfectly.
So was he right?
Well, it ended up taking them 8 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So even the experts can fall prey to the planning fallacy.
That's kind of scary.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. It shows just how powerful this bias can be.
So, okay, they found we're bad at this, but why are we so bad at estimating time?
Well, there are a few reasons.
Okay, hit me with them.
One is that we tend to focus too much on our plans.
Oh.
But like we imagine everything going perfectly, no unexpected problems or delays.
Yeah, like I can totally picture myself cruising through that to-do list.
Exactly. And when we're so focused on that ideal scenario, we tend to ignore all the potential things that could go wrong.
So, like, we're basically living in a fantasy world.
Pretty much, yeah. And this is where the inside view comes in.
Okay, the inside view.
Yeah, it's a term that Kahneman and Tversky coined.
Okay.
It refers to that narrow perspective we have when we're planning something.
So, like, we're stuck inside our own heads.
Exactly. We're so focused on our own intentions and our own plans
Okay,
that we forget to consider all the external factors that could affect us.
got it. And I'm guessing there's an outside view.
You got it. The outside view is about taking a step back
Okay.
and looking at the situation more objectively.
So, like, how?
Well, it involves considering past experiences with similar tasks,
Okay.
looking at data, statistics, anything that can give us a more realistic perspective.
So, like, if I'm planning a trip, I should look at how long similar trips have taken me in the past.
Exactly, instead of just assuming that this time will be different.
Okay, so it's about being realistic and not just optimistic.
Yeah, exactly. Because optimism can actually be one of the biggest drivers of the planning fallacy.
Really? So being positive can actually make us worse at planning.
It can, yeah, because when we're feeling optimistic,
Okay.
we tend to downplay the risks and overestimate our own abilities.
So it's like we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
It can be, yeah. And that's why it's so important to balance that optimism with a healthy dose of realism.
Makes sense. So we talked about focusing on our plans and being overly optimistic, but are there any other reasons why we fall for this planning fallacy thing?
Yeah, there are a couple more.
Okay, lay them on me.
One is that we tend to discount past experiences.
What do you mean?
Like, we might have a history of underestimating how long things take,
Okay.
but we tell ourselves, oh, but this time will be different.
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. This time I'll totally start packing a week before my trip.
Exactly. Or this time I'll definitely stick to my study schedule.
Ugh, yeah, guilty as charged.
It's that this time is different mentality.
Okay, so we're basically ignoring evidence from our own lives.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then there's the way we explain past failures.
How so?
We tend to blame them on external factors.
So like, oh, I was late because of traffic, or I didn't finish the project because my computer crashed.
Exactly. And we convince ourselves that those external factors are unlikely to happen again.
So we're basically giving ourselves a free pass.
In a way,
Yeah.
yeah. And this is where attributional bias comes in.
Attributional bias.
Yeah, it's the tendency to attribute our own failures to external factors,
Okay.
while attributing other people's failures to internal factors like their
Mhm.
personality or their lack of effort.
So, like, I was late because of traffic, but they were late because they're just lazy.
Exactly. It's a classic double standard.
Wow, that's pretty insightful.
It's just one of the many ways that our brains can trick us into making bad decisions.
So, we've got the inside view, being overly optimistic, discounting past experiences, and attributional bias, all working against us.
It's a recipe for disaster, right?
It sounds like it. But is there any hope for us? Can we actually overcome this planning fallacy thing?
Oh, definitely. There are a bunch of strategies that can help us make more realistic predictions.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the tools to fight back.
Oh, first off, we need to be aware of the planning fallacy.
Okay, awareness is key. I get that. But what else can we do?
One of the most effective techniques is forcing ourselves to take that outside view we talked about earlier.
So stepping back and looking at things more objectively.
Exactly. Instead of getting lost in the specifics of our plan, we need to think about past experiences with similar tasks.
Okay, so like actually looking at the data.
Exactly. How long did it really take you to pack for your last trip? Or finish that similar work project?
Ouch, reality check.
And don't just think about your own experiences. Talk to other people who have done similar things.
Oh, that's a good idea. Like asking my friends how long it actually took them to move apartments.
Exactly. Get multiple perspectives to get a more realistic picture.
Okay, that makes sense.
Uh-uh.
What else can we do?
Another powerful technique is called pre-mortem analysis.
Pre-mortem, like before the death of the project.
Yes. It's about imagining the project has completely failed and then brainstorming all the possible reasons why.
Okay, that sounds a little dark.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really effective.
How so?
Well, it forces us to confront those potential obstacles we might otherwise miss.
So like a worst-case scenario planning session.
Exactly. And by thinking through those potential problems in advance,
Right.
we can come up with strategies to avoid them or at least mitigate their impact.
So it's about being prepared for the worst.
Yeah, exactly. And it can also help us set more realistic expectations from the start.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. What else?
Another strategy is to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Oh yeah, that's a classic productivity tip.
It is, and it works really well for combating the planning fallacy, too.
How so?
Well, when we break down a big task into smaller steps,
Okay.
it becomes much easier to estimate how long each step will take.
And then we can add those up to get a more accurate overall estimate.
Exactly. And it can also make the task feel less daunting, which can boost our motivation.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Smaller steps, more accurate estimates, and more motivation.
Exactly. And speaking of motivation, there's one more thing we should talk about.
Okay, I'm ready. What is it?
The role of motivation in the planning fallacy.
Interesting. I would have thought that being more motivated would make us better planners.
It seems logical, right?
Yeah.
But research actually suggests the opposite.
Wait, seriously? So being more motivated can actually make us worse at planning.
It can't, yeah.
How is that even possible?
Well, when we're really motivated to achieve a goal,
Okay.
we tend to focus more on the positive outcome.
Like imagining ourselves crossing the finish line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we downplay the potential obstacles and challenges.
So it's like we're blinded by our own enthusiasm.
It can be, yeah. And this can lead us to make overly optimistic predictions about how long things will take.
So it's like the planning fallacy on steroids.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's even research showing that offering people rewards for early completion can actually backfire.
Really? So incentives can make things
It
worse.
can, yeah, because it just amplifies that motivation to finish quickly.
And that can lead to even more unrealistic predictions.
Exactly. So it's not just about being motivated.
Okay.
It's about channeling that motivation in a way that's realistic and sustainable.
So it's like finding that balance between optimism and realism again.
Exactly. It's about being excited about the goal,
Okay.
but also being honest with ourselves about the challenges we might face along the way.
Wow, this is all so fascinating. It's like a whole new way of thinking about planning.
It is, yeah. And it's a really important skill to develop.
I agree. Especially in today's world where everything seems to be moving faster and faster.
Exactly. We need to be able to make accurate predictions about how long things will take.
Otherwise, we'll just be constantly stressed and overwhelmed.
Exactly. And that's not a good way to live.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So what's next? What other aspects of the planning fallacy should we explore?
Well, we've talked about individual planning, but what about group dynamics?
Ooh, yeah, good point. What happens when multiple people are involved in a project?
That's where things can get really interesting.
I can't wait to hear more.
I'm ready when you are. So we were just talking about individual planning, but what happens when you throw a whole group of people into the mix?
Yeah, like a team project or something.
Exactly. And that's when things can get even more complicated.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, research has shown that group dynamics can actually amplify the planning fallacy.
Really? So working on a project as a team can make us even more prone to underestimating time.
That's what the research suggests.
Wow, that's surprising. I would have thought that having more brains working on a problem would lead to more realistic predictions.
It seems logical, right? But there are a few reasons why groups can actually make things worse.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me why.
One reason is that groups tend to focus even more on the plan itself
Okay.
and less on the potential obstacles.
So it's like that inside view problem we talked about earlier, but on a group level.
Exactly. It's like the collective optimism creates a blind spot.
Interesting. So what can we do to avoid that groupthink effect?
One strategy is to encourage individual team members to make their own predictions before the group discussion.
Oh, that's a good idea. So everyone gets a chance to think things through independently.
Exactly. It helps ensure that everyone's perspective is heard and that we're not just going along with the most optimistic or the most dominant person in the group.
I like that. It's like building in a reality check from the start.
Exactly. And it can also help to have someone in the group play the role of devil's advocate.
Oh, yeah, the person who's always asking, but what if?
Exactly. Their job is to poke holes in the plan and identify potential problems.
That sounds like a fun job.
Not.
It might not be the most popular role,
Okay.
but it's incredibly valuable for making sure that we're not overlooking anything important.
Makes sense. So we've got individual predictions and a devil's advocate. Any other tips for planning as a group?
Yeah, it's also important to be clear about roles and responsibilities.
Okay. That's always a good idea for any team project.
Definitely. And it can also help to create a visual timeline or schedule.
So everyone can see how the different pieces of the project fit together.
Exactly. It can help to keep everyone on track and make sure that we're not missing any deadlines.
I can see how that would be helpful. It's like having a roadmap for the whole project.
Exactly. And it can also help to identify any potential bottlenecks or dependencies.
Oh, yeah, those tasks that need to be completed before others can start. Exactly. By mapping those out in advance, we can avoid any surprises or delays down the line.
This is all really practical advice. I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a handle on this whole group planning thing.
It takes practice, but with the right strategies, groups can definitely make accurate predictions and avoid the pitfalls of the planning fallacy.
I'm hopeful, but I'm also curious about something else. Are there any personality types that are especially susceptible to this bias?
That's a great question. While there's no single personality type that guarantees immunity or susceptibility to the planning fallacy, research does suggest that certain traits can make us more or less prone to this bias.
Okay, I'm really curious now. What kind of traits are we talking about?
Well, for example, people who are naturally optimistic and confident might be more likely to fall into the trap of the planning fallacy.
That makes sense. They tend to see the world through a more positive lens, which can be helpful in many situations.
It can be, yeah. But when it comes to planning, that optimism can lead them to underestimate the challenges and overestimate their own abilities.
So it's like they're wearing rose-colored glasses when they're looking at the project.
It's a good analogy. They're so focused on the positive outcomes that they might not even see the potential obstacles.
Okay, so optimistic people are more prone to this. What about other personality types?
On the flip side, people who are more detail-oriented and cautious might be less susceptible to the planning fallacy.
Interesting. So it's like having a built-in reality check mechanism.
Exactly. They're more likely to consider all the possible scenarios, both good and bad.
And that can help them make more accurate predictions.
It can, yeah. And it can also make them less likely to be swayed by groupthink or overly optimistic team members.
So it's like having a balance of personality types on a team can actually be beneficial.
It can definitely help. Having different perspectives can lead to more robust planning and decision-making.
This is all incredibly helpful. We've explored the inside versus outside view, the role of motivation, the impact of group dynamics, and now even personality traits. It's amazing how much there is to learn about this one bias.
It's a complex phenomenon, for sure, but understanding it can really help us make better decisions in all areas of our lives.
I completely agree. But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, are there any other factors that contribute to the planning fallacy that we should be aware of?
There are a few more nuances we should explore. For instance, research has shown that the way we frame time can also influence our predictions.
The way we frame time. I hadn't even thought about that. How does that play into it?
Well, think about it this way. When we see a task as being far in the future, we tend to focus on the big picture goals.
Okay, that makes sense. Like, I'm excited about launching my new website, but I'm not really thinking about all the nitty-gritty details of coding and design.
Exactly. But as the deadline gets closer,
Okay.
our focus shifts to those concrete, nitty-gritty
Oh,
details.
I can definitely relate to that.
Okay.
Suddenly I'm panicking about all the little things I haven't done yet.
Exactly. And this shift in focus can make us even more susceptible to the planning fallacy. Well, when we're thinking about those abstract goals, it's easier to underestimate the time and effort required to actually achieve them.
Because we're not thinking about all the steps involved.
Exactly. But when we're faced with those concrete details,
Okay.
we suddenly realize how much work is actually involved.
So it's like we're fooling ourselves with our own big picture thinking.
In a way, yes. And this is why it's so important to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It helps us see the task more concretely, even when it's still far in the future.
And that can help us make more realistic predictions.
Exactly. It forces us to confront the reality of the work involved.
I like that. It's like a reality check for our future selves.
It is, and it can make the task feel less daunting as well.
That's always a good thing. So breaking down tasks and being mindful of how we frame time. Any other tips for combating the planning fallacy?
Yeah, another helpful strategy is to visualize the task unfolding in real time.
What do you mean?
Well, instead of just thinking about the end result, try to imagine yourself actually doing the work step by step.
Oh, interesting. So like creating a mental movie of the whole process.
Exactly. Imagine yourself sitting down at your desk, opening up your laptop, writing that report, making those phone calls.
And by doing that,
Yeah.
I'm more likely to anticipate potential challenges and adjust my predictions accordingly.
Exactly. It's about bringing those abstract plans into the realm of the concrete and the real.
I can see how that would be helpful. It's like a dress rehearsal for the actual task.
It is. And it can help us identify any potential roadblocks or snags that we might not have considered otherwise.
This is all really practical advice. I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a toolkit for better planning.
That's the goal.
Fine.
And remember, it's not about achieving perfection. It's about being more mindful and more realistic in our predictions.
I love that. Progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And with practice and awareness, we can all become better planners.
This has been an absolutely eye-opening conversation. We've explored the inside versus outside view, the role of motivation, the impact of group dynamics, time framing, and now even visualization techniques. It's amazing how much there is to learn about this one bias.
And we're not done yet. There's still more to explore.
I'm ready for more. Bring it on.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're just talking about how even the way we think about time can affect our planning.
Right. Like, it's crazy how much our brains can mess with us.
Totally.
Oh,
So any other final tips for us to actually combat this planning fallacy thing?
well, we've talked about a few things already, like taking that outside view and breaking down those tasks.
Right, right.
But there are a few more practical things you can try.
Okay, hit me.
One thing is to build in buffer time.
Buffer time.
Yeah, like when you're estimating how long something will take, add on a little extra.
Oh, so like if I think it'll take 2 hours, maybe give myself 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That way, if there are any unexpected delays or problems, you've got some wiggle room.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm definitely guilty of making those super tight timelines.
Yeah, we all do it. But a little buffer time can make a big difference.
Right off time. Got it. What else?
Another thing to keep in mind is Parkinson's law.
Parkinson's law. What's that?
It's the idea that work expands to fill the time allotted for it.
Oh, so like if I give myself a whole week to write a paper, it'll probably take me the whole week, even if I could have done it in a couple days.
Exactly. So the key is to set realistic deadlines for yourself.
Okay, so like don't give myself too much time or I'll just waste it.
Right. And then once you've set those deadlines, hold yourself accountable to them.
Easier said than done, right?
It can be. But there are ways to make it easier.
Like what?
Well, one thing you can try is making your predictions public.
Public, like telling everyone on social media.
You could, but even just telling a friend or a colleague can help.
How so?
Well, knowing that someone else is aware of your prediction can add a layer of accountability.
Oh, so I'm less likely to procrastinate if I know someone's going to ask me about it.
Exactly. It's like having a built-in cheerleader, but also a little bit of pressure.
Okay, I can see how that would work. What else?
Another thing is to track your progress.
Like keeping a to-do list.
Yeah, or using a project management tool, or even just a simple spreadsheet. The point is to have a way to visualize your progress and see how you're doing against your deadlines.
So it's about staying organized and on top of things.
Exactly. And it can also help you identify any patterns in your planning.
Patterns? Like what?
Well, for example, You might notice that you consistently underestimate how long certain types of tasks take.
Oh, yeah, like I always think I can get ready in 30 minutes, but it always takes an hour.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
once you're aware of those patterns, you can adjust your planning accordingly.
So, like, next time, I'll give myself an hour and a half to get ready.
Exactly. It's about learning from your past experiences and using that knowledge to make better predictions in the future.
It's all making so much sense. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on planning.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's not about achieving perfection.
Right. Progress, not perfection.
Exactly. We're all going to fall prey to the planning fallacy from time to time.
For sure.
The important thing is to be aware of it and to keep learning and growing.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
Just that understanding the planning fallacy is a really powerful tool.
Okay.
It can help you make better decisions in all areas of your life, from your personal goals to your professional projects.
I totally agree. It's like having a secret weapon against procrastination and stress.
Exactly. And it can help you achieve more of what you want in life.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff.
To all our listeners out there, we hope you found this exploration of the planning fallacy helpful. Remember, this bias affects us all, but by understanding it, we can start to overcome it. And who knows, maybe we can all finally get those to-do lists under control.
It's a worthy goal. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Until next time, keep diving deep.